Chantal Meloni is the legal representative for the Palestinian victims in Gaza and an international criminal law professor at the University of Milan. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Chantal, why has the international community failed to take Israel to task for its actions in Gaza, and not just what we're seeing happen now, but the long-standing violations in that territory?
Yes, indeed. Indeed, for too long, and despite the well-documented grave violations of international laws and fundamental principles by Israel, the international community has failed to take any action. And the international community failed to provide protection to the oppressed Palestinian people, and has not only condoned, but even rewarded Israel for its unlawful and sometimes criminal actions, making it a preferred economic partner in the region, providing it with very generous, unconditional support, and literally providing the means, I mean the weapons in the first place, to continue the military occupation, oppression, subjugation of an entire people. And we see it very well today as well. Now you just showed what President Biden said. What is completely missing in the picture, in this very short-sighted narrative, is the broader context. And this is the unlawful 54-year-long military occupation of Palestine imposed by Israel since 1967 and the 73 years old since the Nakba. And since then, Israel has imposed on the Palestinian people a brutal system of military rule, oppression, segregation, dispossession, deprivation of each and every fundamental right. Now, finally, after decades of Palestinians calling it in this way, even mainstream human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch are finally talking about it in terms of apartheid and persecution, which are crimes against humanity. Palestinians are denied their dignity, liberty, the right to self-determination. And we see it very clearly in these days that they are ultimately denied the right to life. And you can see how big this injustice is if you think that exactly in those days when the Palestinian people were forcibly expelled by Israel from their homes, from their land, the world, in the wake of the Second World War, was reaffirming solemnly and unconditionally that all human beings are entitled to fundamental human rights, including, of course, self-determination. Mm-hmm. So reaffirming the principle that all human rights are born equal, and they should not be discriminated against for race or grounds or religion.
I'm sorry to have to interrupt you there. We are running out of time. So I just want to ask, because Israel is not a member of the ICC and says the court has no jurisdiction because it doesn't recognize Palestine as a state, if Israel is found guilty at the ICC, what effect will it have, if any at all?
The fact that Israel does not recognize Palestine as a state is not relevant at this point before the International Criminal Court. The court is an independent organ. After a long and very complex process, recently has opened the investigation into the situation Israel-Palestine, affirming, and this was the pretrial chamber, that for the sake of the jurisdiction of the court, Palestine can be considered as a state. So the investigation will be conducted in an independent manner, will not be one-sided. If Palestinians, and here we have to be clear, if Palestinian responsibilities are involved, for instance, for launching rockets from Gaza, this will also be investigated. But the prosecutor, for sure, will now have the possibility to investigate individual criminal responsibilities also of Israeli officials, Israeli military commanders that allegedly committed grave war crimes and crimes against humanity in the Palestinian territories. Mm-hmm. And let me just add one thing, that this investigation is strongly wanted by Palestine, by the Palestinian people, whereas Israel is trying with every possible means and power to obstruct, block, and reject it and make it impossible. And this already shows, right, the different approach.
Okay, Chantal Meloni, great to get your take on that. Live to us there for President from Berlin, speaking on behalf of the Palestinian victims in Gaza.